Hello, everyone. We are here today with Kara Nepomuceno, who is coming to the call from San Diego, California, and is going to talk to us about her time learning Pangalay in the Philippines. And Kara is currently a Chauncey Fellow. Could you tell us a little bit more about what that means, Kara?
Yes, of course. So the Chauncey program is affiliated with Oberlin College in Northeast Ohio. It's one of the longest standing study of postgraduate fellowship programs in the United States. And through the Chauncey Fellowship, I'm able to teach as a speaking tutorial instructor in English at Universitas Gadjah Mada in Yogyakarta, Indonesia. And it's really exciting because my academic focus has been on regional dance in Southeast Asia, and I'm really looking forward to learning more about dance and the dance ecosystems in Yogyakarta. And I'm also super excited to get to know the amazing students at Universitas Gadjah Mada and really explore dance scholarship and hone my teaching skills.
Yeah, and you are such an amazing dance scholar. I was I was talking with Damalari, another one of the authors, the other day, who also has a background in dance scholarship, and we were just talking about how all the dance scholars pulled in so many fascinating pieces of history and anthropology and positionality statements, which I had no idea what that was before this project started. So it's been so much fun to write this story with you. And I wonder if you could just start out by telling the viewers, what is Pangalay?
Sure, of course. So Pangalay is a dance form that can be difficult to define. And I myself, through the journey of traveling to Manila and after that experience, also talking to other scholars and reading the literature and talking to other artists, slowly began to form a larger idea of what constitutes Pangalay in this day and age. Um, and I would say most concepts of Pangalay are connected to communities in the Sulu archipelago, and that's at the southwestern edge of the Philippine archipelago. But the codified form of Pangalay I learned through my in Asia winter term Chauncey grant is known as the Amal Bangsa instructional method form of Pangalay. And this method is based on gestures from Tao subcommunities in Sulu, but drawn from many geographic areas as well. So it's quite different from what one might see in Sulu, and it's taught mainly to residents in Manila, the urban center of the Philippines, and other cities in the United States that are part of the Philippine diaspora.
Cool. And I just pulled up a map of the Philippines. Is this, and I put in Sulu archipelago, is this accurate, Kara? Is it way down here, that archipelago?
Yes, that looks right. It's a little blurry on my screen, but yes, that looks right.
Cool. And Manila's way up north. So how did it actually go from the Sulu archipelago up to Manila?
Oh, great question. So from my experience with the Alin Alin Dance Circle in Manila, I learned that the founder, Ligaya Fernando Amolbangsa, spent some time in Tawi-Tawi, Sulu, um, and during her time there was able to see and experience Pangalay. And she observed those gestures and deconstructed them so that students from outside communities of Sulu would be able to um, experience some of these forms.
Hmm.
Um, she later she has been in Manila for quite a while and has built a group there, which became Alin Alin Dance Circle.
Very cool. And, in your story, you talk about how this dance involves a lot of hand gestures that are meant to represent the waves, the birds, the parts of life in the Sulu archipelago. Is there anything you would add to that? Like, why do you think this dance has so many hand movements?
Hmm. Yeah, so in the story, I write about my experience learning these hand gestures from the Amobangsa method. And for me, they really resonated with me because I was able to um, not only feel an embodied connection with the environment or my imagined environment in Manila and the romantic notion of the Philippines, of palm trees, of beaches. I was also able to kind of conjure an imagined or another romanticized version of my hometown in San Diego, California, which plays up similar imagery of palm trees, beaches, um, rolling waves, cool breezes that I felt were absent from my other experiences of dance. And in my story, I also talk about how um, I really needed to look closely at those notions. And while they were so enjoyable, I also needed to look critically at um, how those ideas um, worked out in the world and whether they really belonged in my performance and my experience of this form of dance. Um, but I still find it so valuable to connect with the environment through movement and these explicit gestures of waves, of palm trees swaying, of seaweed swaying, of birds flying. I find that still a very valuable idea. Um, and it's, for me, it was a novel experience to connect to the environment through regionally based dance from Southeast Asia.
Very cool. And I know you're going to read us an excerpt from your story in a little bit, but I was wondering if you'd be willing to actually share with us some of those hand movements, and maybe I'll even try to do them with you, just to give the watchers an idea of like what sort of hand gestures are included in this dance and what does it represent.
Sure. So these hand gestures, of course, um, are taken from the Amobangsa instructional method of Pangalay, and this structure or this series of gestures are really created by Ligaya Amobangsa, um, and it's because of the prevalence of this method, you'll also encounter it in some performing arts groups in California and across the United States. But they might not be recognized by folks in Sulu.
Thank you
Okay,
for the clarification.
all right. So one of the first things um, artists do in the Allen Dance Circle is they warm up their hands. And a common form of imagery is thinking about marbles and holding the marbles in your hands and dropping them, scrunching those marbles and dropping, and exhaling as you do. Once you've warmed up your hands, um, you might practice warming up the fingers next by articulating through in a circular motion that in this method is called kolek kolek.
Mm.
And my hands are far from warm. If you did this over time, it would feel much more fluid and you would be able to articulate each finger and each connection much more smoothly. But that's usually how dancers would start warming up their hands and fingers.
I love that. I love the idea of releasing marbles, and it really gets your imagination going and the muscles in your hands going. And even that little bit, my hands actually were getting tired. It's like nothing at all. And yet it actually, they're muscles that don't typically get worked, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And it really, for me, it really feels like something is activating back here when
Mm.
I'm really focusing on the articulation of the fingers. It's almost like an antenna waking up, and there's a new way to perceive space
Hmm.
and the weight of the air.
So say a little bit more about that. Like, what is this new way to perceive space and the weight of the air?
Oh, wow. I guess what I mean there is that um, it's just as you said, because these muscles are muscles we don't usually pay attention to. Most of the time, they're like this on the keyboard,
Hmm.
or like this. There's not often an opportunity in my life to stretch my hands and to really feel their full expansion. And when when I have the opportunity to stretch them and really expand them, I feel like they're um, more able to sense um, to sense my environment.
Yeah.
Like if the sensation of like touching this table is very different now that my hands are warmer.
Huh. Yeah, I just touched my table too, and I was like, yeah, it does feel different. And I remember even in your story, like one of the final scenes is you're dancing in this room, and you write about feeling the air on your fingertips. And I thought to myself, I don't know if I've ever felt the air like running through my fingers or really brought my awareness to that experience. So it I get that it really heightens the awareness that you have. And it's crazy because even as you stretched out your fingers, I never think of my hands as being that big, but when we do this, they look gigantic.
Especially on camera.
Yeah, I know. That's so
Yeah,
cool. Well,
yeah.
and tell me, was this your first time in Manila, this trip that you took to learn Pangalay?
No, it wasn't my first time. Um, I I am lucky to have been able to visit the Philippines several times. My parents moved to the United States in their early 20s, and much of our family is still in Manila and Angeles, Pampanga. And fortunately, I've been able to visit throughout my childhood and recently as well.
Mm, that's beautiful. Well, I would love it if you would read us an excerpt from your story. Would you be up for that?
Absolutely.
Oh.
And I'm so happy to share these words. I feel like um, it's so rewarding to share this story, and I hope it resonates with other young Philippine Americans um, and other young Filipino people in the diaspora. And I really commend you, Meg, for helping me refine this narrative
Mm,
and try to take my head out of that super academic space and connect to the sensation and the emotion
mm.
um, in this experience.
Thank you. You did such a beautiful job. It was a total honor to work with you and help you tell the story. Mm.
All right, so I'll start. This is an excerpt from Dance Adventures, True Stories About Dancing Abroad, and this is my chapter, A Month in Manila. We'll start in the middle. My exploration of Pangalay began during a summer apprenticeship at the Samahan Filipino-American Performing Arts and Education Center in my hometown of San Diego. This organization is dedicated to teaching and providing performances in Philippine dance and music.
Oh, pause for just 1 second. Our live thing went off.
No worries.
Let me do it again. Gonna go live.
I'm so impressed. I've never done a live before, so I don't know how you're keeping track of it all.
It's pretty simple. Zoom makes it pretty simple. I just want to make sure people hear your beautiful story. So we'll restart um, with the excerpt as soon as I get it going live. Kara reads an excerpt from her story about dancing Pangalay in the Philippines. An excerpt from Dance Adventures. All right, we're going to go live again. Here we go. All right, and we are back for you to read an excerpt of your story. So for those of you who were tuned in and we got cut off, we're back again, and Kara's going to restart reading her excerpt from her story about Pangalay in the Philippines.
Awesome. Thanks, Meg. So this is the chapter called A Month in Manila, and I'm reading an excerpt from the middle of this chapter. My exploration of Pangalay began during a summer apprenticeship at the Samahan Filipino-American Performing Arts and Education Center in my hometown of San Diego. This organization is dedicated to teaching and providing performances in Philippine dance and music. After having grown up training in ballet, I wanted to explore dance traditions that I thought would affirm my identity as the Filipino American. At this time, I knew little about my ancestry and the diverse history of the Philippines, but I felt Filipino dance might be a good place to start. With parents who had been raised in the cities of Manila and Angeles, I assumed I could perform anything from the 7,000 island archipelago. I had no idea about the artistic, demographic, and cultural differences between ethno-linguistic groups in different parts of the country. Apprenticing at Samahan would quickly challenge my assumptions. I learned and watched many dances from the Philippines, some of which illuminated aspects of the country's history. Dances such as tinikling and payong, associated with the central Luzon region, had originated at the time when Spain had colonized the Philippine archipelago. The imposition had lasted 300 years and led to the region becoming predominantly Catholic. It had also created a class of wealthy Tagalog families who worked for the Spanish state. In this way, many artistic traditions became representative of the nation that the Spanish would soon name after their monarch, King Philip II. Other art forms, such as the Shega folk dance, depict old customs around courtship in the upper middle class and exemplified the Spanish version of the ideal Filipino, ideal in quotes, wealthy, well-educated, Catholic, and land-owning. Performing to the strumming of a guitar ensemble, which had also been introduced by the Spanish, women twirl in long European-style dresses through several partnered and group dances. The men also wear Spanish-influenced clothing, typically sporting loose pants rolled up to the calf, a plain shirt, and a kerchief tied around their neck. After the Spanish occupation ended, these dances developed into a folk canon, a series of dance suites performed and accepted as a representation of national culture. They now form a national narrative about Philippine identity. At Samahan, I learned suites associated with indigenous groups who live in Cordilleras, a mountainous region of Luzon, Muslim groups who live farther south in the region of Mindanao, and predominantly Muslim Tausug, Yakan, and Sama communities in the Sulu archipelago, a chain of islands in the southwestern part of the country. I gravitated most towards dances from the last area, and especially Pangalay. The first time I saw this dance, it looked so slow and fluid that time itself seemed suspended. As my instructor demonstrated for the class, his hands and arms decelerated, moving gracefully between each pose. His eyes focused gently on the tips of his fingers. As he came to the end of the dance, he uncurled his hands into a gesture with his palms upturned. His fingers were held together and curled back toward his wrist, his thumb thrust forward. In that moment, a memory flickered. I recalled seeing my aunt in a similar pose, draped in a jewel-toned sash from shoulder to hip. She had posted the photo to our family's group chat years before, but I had forgotten its context. I messaged her later that I'd begun learning the same dance. "That's wonderful," she wrote back. "Send me photos and videos of your next performance." The more I learned about Pangalay, the more I appreciated it. My teachers at Samahan told me the dance focused on the curving and curling of fingers and palms, with performers often wearing long metal fingernails to accentuate the shapes made by their hands. In class, I began to learn a rich movement vocabulary that seemed to reflect the beauty of the Philippine archipelago. Gestures represented ocean waves, a palm leaf, a gust of wind, or the flutter of a bird's wings. As a slow but constantly moving dance, the practice made me feel deeply connected to my breath, my internal sensations, and my imagination. In class, I relaxed into the feeling of curving my arms and hands through the air, imagining the flowers and birds of the islands as I transitioned between each gesture. Each time I raised my arms and bent my knees, I saw myself dancing before a wide horizon of sand and water. As I glided slowly across the floor, I could be swaying on the sand or balancing on the bow on the bow of a long fishing boat. This dance, born in a community next to the sea, made me feel connected both to the San Diego shoreline and to the Sulu archipelago. While I'd never been there, I imagined it was a region of vibrant blue seas and thriving wildlife.
Beautiful. And I love that you included this incredible picture of, can you tell us who this is and what she's?
Yes, this is Tita Nanette Matilak, who is so important to the Alan Dance Circle. And this quarantine, she has been teaching weekly virtual classes. So here she's performing Igal Kub Kub, which Alan calls the fan dance. And that specific choreography from Alan using Pangalay movement vocabulary. But yes, this particular dance is choreographed by their group.
And I see she's got the fan here, and then those long fingernails that you talked about, she's wearing on the other hand.
That's right. Yes.
Cool. I love it. Well, thank you so much, Kara, for being willing to share your beautiful story with us and for all your dedicated work on contributing to the book. How can others learn Pangalay? If they've seen this interview, they want to either take a class online or, just look up some YouTube videos, where can they go?
Oh, great question. For myself, I was so fortunate to connect with Alan through my aunt, who I write about in this story. But I think another awesome thing about this book is that in addition to the story, there's recommended resources in the back of this book where you can see some of these videos and scholarly articles and learn more about the context of Pangalay in different areas. If folks are seeking classes or they want to see more performance, some great videos are on YouTube from this group called Ethnic Suluk Sandakan. There are other videos from Alan Dance Circle if you're interested in their method, which is based in Manila. And if you're in the United States, you can also connect to Philippine performing arts groups like Samahan in San Diego and Malaya. based near Los Angeles who have trained in the Amolbangsa method and often teach this method and perform on the West Coast.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kara. It's been such a pleasure to talk with you and hear you read your excerpt.
Thank you so much, Megan. It has been such a pleasure working with you, and I'm really happy to share this experience.
Awesome.